Te reo ererangi o te mānia. This episode was produced in Otatahi by Plains Media, with support from New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to Spin Me a Tale with Tessa Trolove. Let's step into a world of dragons endearing with Avis and the Promise of Dragons by Healther McQuillan and published by Ahoy, an imprint of the Cuba press in 2019. Close your eyes and let the magic carry you away. The change in the front garden at the dead end of Menagerie Street was remarkable. The grass was mown and the cut green ends glistened juicily in the late sun. The path had been swept clean and the shrubs that grew over the low fence were trimmed into even shapes. The weeds in the border gardens had been pulled out, the soil had been turned, exposing worms to the daylight, and at even intervals blue and yellow primroses had been planted. Bruno was on a ladder with a brush and hose attachment washing down the windows and the cobwebs from above the frames. Avis saw her father on the inside, wiping the glass with scrunched up newspaper and pointing out stubborn splotches of dried bird poop to Bruno. When he saw Avis, he opened a window from the inside and called out, "Hey, Avy bird! What do you think of the transformation? Maybe we'll make the front page of the Happy Home and Great Garden magazine next week, instead of Gossip and Guff. Hey, watch out!" He slammed the window shut as Bruno turned the hose on him. "Pretty amazing what we men can do when we put our minds to it, eh, sis?" said Bruno. Avis held up her hands to silence her brother. He had been listening to the old transistor radio while he'd worked, and the music had stopped for the 5 o'clock news update. The announcer was reading the headlines and she'd recognised a name. Avis turned up the volume. The prominent local scientist was taken into custody today following a raid on a farm where a number of illegally imported reptiles were located. The police are holding her on suspicion of involvement in a wildlife smuggling ring. "Is that your pet sitting lady?" asked Bruno, climbing down from his ladder. Avis didn't reply because the next piece of news intensified the sick feeling that was growling in her stomach. Police are seeking help from the public in locating the whereabouts of a local schoolboy, Drake Snelling. The 12-year-old was last seen outside his home just before midday today. Drake Snelling is described as blonde, small-framed, and short for his age. "Isn't that the kid who's been bullying you?" asked Bruno. He was shushed again because the third news item also concerned Avis. And in further news, there has been a number of calls to police and authorities today concerning an identified flying object over the region. Observers report a large shimmering shape moving at high speeds toward the mountain ranges and then returning a few hours later. A frightened yelp escaped from Avis's throat and she sank onto the front doorstep. She dropped her head into her hands. "Hey, Avy, you all right?" asked Bruno, turning off the hose and coming closer to her. He avoided the grazed spot on her chin as he gently lifted her head. Avis was sure that she must look as pinched and pale as Drake. "Avy, what's wrong? Do you know something about what was in the news?" Avis nodded. "About the UFO?" Avis nodded. "About that missing kid?" Avis nodded and dropped her head back into her hands. "And about the reptile smuggling doctor?" Avis started to sob, her shoulders shuddering. "Crikey, Avy, I think you'd better tell me what's going on." "It's all out of control," Avis sobbed. "I promised to keep it a secret." "It's making you unhappy." Avis remembered what she'd said to Melinda. "If it's a bad secret, like if someone is going to get hurt, then I won't keep it." And she was hurting so much. She needed to tell someone. "I tried to do the right thing, but I don't know what the right thing is." "Then let me help you," said Bruno, wrapping his arms around her. "You're my kid's sister. Sorry I didn't do anything about that Drake kid the other day." At the sound of his name, Avis let out a wail. "Drake Snelling, he's what, dead?" "No," sobbed Avis. "I thought I wanted him dead, but I didn't really. Humbert trapped him instead. But it would have been better if he hadn't, because now he knows everything. And Melinda was meant to sort it all out tomorrow, but now the police have got her, and they'll come for me next." And then what will happen to Humbert? Steams of snot ran from her nose. Bruno gave her the rag he'd been using to wipe bird poop off the windows. She found a cleanish patch and blew her nose. None of that made much sense, said Bruno. Where's the kid? In the tunnel house between two security doors. And the tunnel house is where? At Melinda's. It's for the lizards she smuggles in. You knew that when you took the job? Yes. Avis? It was a secret. Well, it's not anymore, said Bruno. If the police suspect her of smuggling, they'll be getting a search warrant for her place. That sent Avis wailing again. They'll frighten Humbert. He'll eat them. Who the hell is Humbert? He's a dragon. My dragon. He can make himself invisible, sort of shimmery. The UFO? Yes. You better be kidding me, Avi. I'm not. Crikey, he said again. I reckon you'd better take me to this lizard doctor's place and show me what's going on. I owe you some big brother intervention. Avis looked up at him in amazement. You're not just doing this because... She felt the dragon's tear around her neck vibrating with Humbert's gentle snores. I'm your brother, remember? And this is the most interesting shit I've ever heard, he said. Come on. Avis looked up into the eyes of the brother she remembered. This was the Bruno who had taught her to ride a two-wheeler, had built houses of Lego for her mini doll, and had held her hand on the flight home from Australia after visiting Mum. She took his offered hand now and let him pull her up off the step. Bruno called out, Hey Dad, I'm just going with Avi. She left something behind at the pet sitting place. Won't be long. Hey, Dad called after them. Are you two trying to pike off doing more work? But they'd already disappeared down the end of the tidy path through the neatly trimmed lawn at the dead end of Menagerie Street. Humbert was detectable only by his hum and a slight shifting of the light beneath the huge rhododendron tree. Avis had to use her hands to find the bulk of him and feel her way around his body to his snout. Ready to explore? He breathed. Just a moment, she said, opening her bag. The chilly chocolate tumbled to the ground along with the snacks and flying clothes that Avis had packed. Humbert became slightly more visible as the chocolate scent reached his nostrils. Only slightly, though, like a waft of smoky air. Put it away, he said urgently, and Avis, sensing the way the chemicals in the chocolate tugged at Humbert's nerves, dropped it back into her bag. She pulled the thick track pants on over her shorts, zipped up her jacket, put on the hat and sunglasses, and scrambled onto Humbert's barely shimmering back. It was as if she were rock climbing over glassy waves, finding invisible handholds and toeholds between his scales. She scrambled up to crouch at his neck, clinging on with her knees. Ready? Humbert asked. Humbert stretched out his neck and readied his strong, muscular legs. Not quite, said Avis. How do you know how to fly without someone to teach you? How do you know how to breathe or to walk? The breathing just happened, but I had to learn to walk, and I fell over lots of times before I got it right. Really? Oh well, said Humbert in a tone of such casual disinterest that the hairs on the back of Avis's neck twitched and shivered. You'll just have to trust me. But what if I fall? Avis asked, gripping a ridge bone on his back. Do you want to fall? Do you need to fall? Asked Humbert. Of course not. Then you won't fall, said Humbert. Avis watched the scales around her shimmer as they turned over to reveal tiny barbs that gripped like Velcro to the inside of her trouser legs. She tried to move her legs, but she was held tight. The dragon leapt into the air. The ground receded and the horizon spread out further and further. Over the streets and towns, over fields and farmland and forests they flew. It was like flying on a shimmering cloud, though Avis could feel the solid body beneath her. She knew that people could not see her tucked safely between Humbert's shoulder blades, but they would see a flickering dragon shape of sky and cloud colours with maybe just the occasional glint of bronze. She grinned to think that by the time they had their phones out to snap a shot, Humbert and she would be gone, and people would wonder at the meteorological mystery they'd think that had just occurred. It wouldn't occur to them that the dragon-shaped cloud was a real dragon. The air was cool, but the body beneath Avis radiated warmth. Her fingers and toes tingled. I'm flying on a myth that is very, very real. Over flat land and hills and mountains, Humbert swooped and swerved, changing direction erratically as he searched for the place he would recognise as home. Nowhere could he see the lazy brown river meandering through dense jungle, banked by mossy caves and hanging vines. The rivers below them rushed through narrow gorges and were blue with melted glaciers. There were caves, but they were dry and cold. Avis felt all this through the tear, and she sensed Humbert's loss of confidence as he realised that he had his instinctive bearings wrong. It's not your fault, she assured him. Melinda took you out of the jungle. Humbert's confusion turned quickly to anger and thoughts of harming Melinda. You mustn't think like that, Avis told him. She was doing the right thing, even though it doesn't seem that way to you. Your jungle has been destroyed. The trees have been burned and bulldozed. The rivers are blocked with mud washed down from the bare hillsides and poisoned by chemicals. Humbert's anger turned to the people who lit the fires and the bulldozer drivers and the landowners who poured chemicals and the people who funded them to make a profit. Humbert, you can't take revenge on them all. We'll just have to find another place for you to live. Another place for them to destroy. He was flying faster now, spurred by a frustrated anger that Avis understood. It was the same fury that she had felt when her mother announced that she was leaving to be with Aaron. The same sense of hopelessness, of lost possibilities and dreams, and the horrible realization that the world did not work the way she'd expected it to. She remembered the heat of her anger and the coldness of the revenge that she had wanted to take, the cruel words that she had shouted in front of her mother, and the ugly thoughts she had harboured. I'll kill him for you, Humbert said. No, Avis cried, realising that the dragon had heard her thoughts about Aaron Miller as needs. That's not what I want. Those are only thoughts. It's okay to have them, but not act on them. You have to use your head. Think things out. Humbert spread his wings and began to glide over the hills below. He found a resting place to land in the shade of a stand of bush. The barbs withdrew under the scales and Avis was able to slither off and stretch her legs, which ached from gripping so tightly, despite the dragon Velcro. I'm glad I picked you, Avis. Of all the humans in the world, Humbert said. You have wisdom, so tell me what to do. I have my unhatched mate to think of. She doesn't want to wait much longer. Where will we go? There's no jungle here, so what should we do? Avis stood looking over the tussocky hills with patches of yellow gorse and leaned in against the scaly shimmering that was Humbert's front left leg. I'm sorry, Humbert. I don't know what you should do. I don't know where you can be safe and happy and free. I need help. You said that before, and I sorted it, didn't I? With that big guy. Avis stopped to think who he meant. You mean Bruno? You did that? It was easy. He wanted to help really, so I didn't have to push much. Avis clutched the dragon's tear. Has this got mind control powers? It amplifies my hum when I'm not present. Humbert, you haven't been using it on me, have you? She stepped away to look at where a dragon's eye flickered amber light. You knew which clothes to bring for this trip, didn't you? He said. I can only make suggestions. You make the decision. Well, don't, said Avis. I can do without the pressure. Humbert quickly changed the subject before he had a promise forced on him. I need something to eat, he whined. I'm hungry. Flying has made me really hungry, but no chocolate. A bellbird trilled its sweet song from the nearby bush and Humbert lifted his head. No way, said Avis. But I'm hungry and you promised, he whined. I promise to do whatever you need, and I will. But you do not need that bird. It didn't bother you when I ate the other bird back at Melinda's. Why worry about this one? Well, said Avis, for one thing, I was bothered by the way you gobbled up the blackbird. It was disgusting, but this is different. Native birds are endangered. There are too many predators, like what's happening to the other lizards Melinda's trying to save. Like what's happening to me, said Humbert. Sort of, yes. said Avis. Her mind was ticking over, trying to find justifications. But maybe you could eat the predators, the rats and weasels and stoats. Then that would be helping the birds. Humbert sat back on his haunches. Is that what you need? For me to eat the predators? Avis felt the word yes forming in her mouth, but she paused. There was something in Humbert's tone that made her think before she spoke. She clutched the tear in its satin bag to see his thoughts better. He was picturing himself swooping down on the bulldozers and scattering the jungle workers. He was imagining splintering the bones of the men in suits, who paid small wages and gobbled up all of the profit. Only the ones I've named, she formed her words carefully, the rats and the stoats and the weasels, in this particular piece of bush. There are cats here too, said Humbert, disappointed. Can I eat them? Just the feral ones, not any that are pets. Why not? Asked Humbert. Look, are you hungry or not? She replied, to avoid having to justify why a predator was more deserving of mercy if it was named Tiddles, had a cosy bed to sleep in and a dish of kitty food waiting at home, than a wild one that was hunting to survive. Humbert was too hungry to argue further. Leaving Avis to sit and wait on a fallen log, he pushed his way between the branches. Silently he hunted. The predators had no chance against his incredible speed and invisibility, but Avis tried not to feel sorry for them. Each furry creature that Humbert crunched would have done the same to the birds and the lizards that belonged here in the bush. She sat on the log eating one of the muesli bars and looked across the green and gold hills that rolled like waves on the ocean. She closed her eyes and a picture of the sea came to her mind in such a strong image that when she opened them, she expected to see the surf breaking in front of her. She reached for the dragon's tear around her neck to see if Humbert was sending her a message, but it was humming only with the satisfaction of a well-fed dragon. When Humbert returned, Avis climbed onto his back once more. We need to go back to Melinda's place, she said. We should check on the other lizards. And we need to do something about Drake. While finding a new home for Humbert was a big problem, Drake was now the more immediate one. What if he tells everyone about the dragon and the illegal lizards? What if he goes to the gossip magazines or the television? Or if he spreads it all over the internet? Avis couldn't think of a solution that would both keep their secret safe and Drake Snelling alive. In order to check on the lizards in the tunnel house, Avis had to first get past Drake. His tear-stained face and red-rimmed eyes pleaded at her from behind the shed window. She glanced at where Humbert rested invisibly on the petals beneath the rhododendrons, turned her back on Drake and marched back to her dragon with the bar of chili chocolate unwrapped in her hands. I need you visible, she said. Eat this, but don't grow any bigger. You're big enough as it is. Avis felt the cool breath from his nostrils as his invisible head bent down and a wet tongue wrapped itself around the bar of chocolate and pulled it into a drooling mouth. The chocolate vanished. Within moments, Humbert's beautiful copper scales were visible. His bronze wings were folded and his long, shiny snout wrinkled in delight as the aftertaste of the chocolate warmed the roof of his mouth and his throat with a hint of chili. He hummed, and as he breathed out, a sigh of happiness, a flow of hot steam jetted from his nostrils. Avis jumped back. A strange, gurgling, grinding sound came from Humbert's belly as he let out a burp. A small flash of flame erupted from his throat. This time it was Humbert who jumped back in surprise. His eyes opened wide under their bony ridges and glowed with excitement. Avis heard him gulp in a mouthful of air and let it rumble into his belly before he let it out as another burp and a burst of fire. The flames licked at some dried twigs and petals on the grass, and they smouldered into a small fire that Avis quickly stomped out. "Why did you do that?" asked Humbert, annoyed that his new trick had not been applauded. "Because it could spread. Fire is dangerous, Humbert. Really dangerous. You have to be super careful with it." "But it's fun. It tickles in my tummy and feels really good coming out," he said, sucking in another mouthful of air. "Just don't let it catch on anything then. Blow it into the air," said Avis. She turned back to look through the shed window at Drake. His face had gone white again, and he was cowering away from the doorway. Humbert breathed a jet of flame into the air behind Avis. Drake Snelling screamed and threw himself to the floor. "Come and stand guard," said Avis, and she walked confidently towards the shed with her fire-breathing dragon. She punched in the numbers to open the first door. Drake Snelling crouched against the wall with his hands over his head. "Don't move, Drake," Avis commanded, and Humbert pushed his head through the doorway behind her. "I'm going into the tunnel house, but one move from you and my dragon will turn you into a barbecued sausage, black on the outside and pink in the middle." Humbert let out a breath of hot steam. Drake recoiled and whimpered. He pulled his knees into his chest. "Please let me go," he begged. "Please." "Shut up," said Avis, but she lobbed him the last of the muesli bars to show that she wasn't completely heartless. She punched in the combination code to open the internal door and stepped into the warm, lush dampness of the tunnel house. A shrill chirruping and insistent clicking noise welcomed her as the lizards stirred and called to each other. She saw the jeweled green geckos watching her with their goggle eyes from the branches of the trees, and she stepped over brown shiny skinks that scuttled across the path in front of her. In the centre of the tunnel house there was a feeding frenzy. Lizards were gorging themselves on squirming maggots and newly hatched fruit flies. Avis stepped around them and looked up. The netting was still strung across the hole in the roof, and although some lizards were bathing themselves up on the roof in the late afternoon sun, they were not making any attempt to escape. Avis walked slowly towards the area that had been Humbert's enclosure. She kneeled gently into the soil and peered under the fern. There, in a little hollow of cooler leaves, was the egg of Humbert's mate. As Avis looked, the egg made a sudden lurch and some of the dirt covering fell away. Through its soft grey shell, Avis could see the outline of a leg, or perhaps a wing, roll beneath the surface. She pulled more leaves around the egg. "Wait," she said softly. "We aren't ready for you yet." She sat back on her haunches and surveyed the challenges that the day had brought. The damaged roof, the overturned fruit fly boxes, the overexcited lizards, the shoplifting, the huge fire-breathing dragon, the bully in the shed, and, at home, the problems with Bruno, her parents, and Aaron Miller. Avis stood up and brushed the damp soil from her hands. "These are not my problems," she declared to a curious skink. "I don't know how to fix all this. Melinda can sort out the roof and the lizards, and what to do with Humbert and his mate when she gets back tomorrow. Bruno and Mum and Dad can sort out their own problems." She was startled by the sudden scurrying of the lizards as Humbert began a penetrating whine. The sensation of it tore right through Avis's chest. "Humbert, are you hurt?" she cried as she ran the length of the tunnel house. She grabbed the door handle to the shed and pulled it open, expecting the worst. Drake was huddled on the floor with his hands over his ears. Humbert was just outside, not guarding the doorway, but howling most dreadfully with his snout dripping steaming snot. "What's wrong? What happened? Where are you hurt?" Avis gabbled as she slung her arms around his neck to hold him to her. His pain rippled through her. "You have broken our bond," he cried, and another wail like a siren ripped through the air. "Quiet," Avis commanded. "Our bond is still in place, so do what you're told." Humbert stopped wailing, but the tears and steaming snot continued. "You think I'm someone else's problem. You're going to bind me to Melinda. You're going to walk away from our promise." Avis thought about this. It was true. That was exactly what she had just thought. "I don't know what to do," she tried to explain to Humbert. "I was just meant to open up the fruit fly boxes and that was all. I'm the pet sitter. Melinda's your real owner." Every scale on Humbert's body rattled with indignation. He shook himself and snorted. "I am nobody's pet. Nobody owns me. Nobody owns a dragon." He leaned back and Avis saw his leg muscles rippling and his wings twitching, ready for takeoff. "I need you to stay where you are," she commanded again, and again he had to obey even though it was clear that he wanted to fly above the town, bellowing smoke in all directions, careless in his anger and dismay. "See? Our bond is still in place. said Avis more gently. I won't leave you, but I need help. I am just a kid. And I'm just a baby, sobbed Humbert. Avis gasped. I forgot, she said. You're so big and seem to know things. I forgot that you were only days old. I'm so sorry. She ran her hands gently over the bony ridge of his head, stroking down towards his eyes. I'm sorry, baby dragon. She heard a scuffling noise behind her and spun around to see Drake Snelling sliding across the floor towards the exit. She quickly slammed the outer door shut in his face. You're not going anywhere. And she let a breath of hot air snort out of her nostrils. Disappointingly, no steam accompanied it. Avis walked Humbert back to the shady space beneath the rhododendrons. I won't break our bond, she said. I'll look after you and make sure that you're safe. Melinda will be home tomorrow. She'll help us, and then your mate can hatch, and you can go somewhere and be a wild dragon like you're meant to be. Humbert nodded, because it sounded right and easy. I need you to stay here all night, though. No flying, no hunting, okay? I'll bring you food in the morning and we'll wait for Melinda. Humbert nodded again, and the nod went on, lower and lower. Avis realised how tired he was. Now you need to rest. You're just a baby, and it has been a very busy day. You've done a lot of growing and exploring, and now it's time to sleep. Humbert lowered his snout onto his front legs. His eyes closed. Avis waited until his breathing was even and his humming was filled with the contentedness of sleep. She brushed her lips across the scales on his neck. They were warm like the bonnet of a car that had just come to a stop. She clutched the dragon's tail around her neck and felt the same warmth and the same humming vibration. As she walked back to the tunnel house, Drake came right to the window. His face looked pinched in, as if it were only bones and skin. His hands were dirty, and Avis noticed that he had a stain down his trousers, where he had wet his pants. I can't let you go just yet, she called through the reinforced glass. I still don't know what to do. She turned her back and did her best to ignore the pounding on the window. That's all for today's adventure on Spin Me a Tale. Don't miss the next chapter coming your way next Saturday at 9:30 a.m. on Plains Media, broadcasting on 96.9 FM. Stay curious and keep the magic alive.